Well, hello, sports fans. It's Larry Eater. This is Athletics Chat numero 4. Stuart and I are... Stuart is in lovely Oxford, England, and I am in San Jose, California. And Stuart, it's dropped from a lovely 36 degrees Celsius, which it was the last couple of days, so 102 to 106 over here. Now it's a lovely about 25, 26. So I'm sitting in the backyard. I'm enjoying the little hummingbirds tweeting around. And thank you for catching up with us on, what's it, about 9:30 Friday night?
It's 8:30. I think it's about 36 with us as well, but that's probably Fahrenheit.
Yeah. Oh, you're that cold, huh? Oh, my God.
It's got incredibly cold this week. I mean, it was really hot earlier in the week, and it's now become really cold.
Wow. Yes, because in Wisconsin at this time, it's in the, it's nice, warm, late spring. I mean, we had snow 2 weeks ago. But in California, it's just started. It's really getting hot. And so what we've been doing in the evenings is we're 30 minutes from the coast. So we literally can drive over the coast because there's no traffic. And we're just going into one other county. And we put the windows down for a half hour, and then we drive back. And so we can feel cool temperatures. But I'm going to behave today and get some work done. And we have a lovely list of topics. I'm going to start something that I didn't even put down there. What were you hearing in the UK about the Black Lives Matter protests? Was that covered in the UK? Did you hear about the protest in the US?
Oh yes, I mean that's a major news story, and in fact there have been protests in several cities of the UK as well, and of course, track and field athletics in the UK is a predominantly a black sport. And so quite a lot of our athletes have been quite vociferous. And British athletics have posted a picture of our medal-winning sprint relay teams, which are, of course, all black.
Cool. Yeah, the USATF has been... They did something cool the other day. Max Siegel, the CEO, interceded on... there's a hammer thrower, Gwen Berry, who's quite good over here. And Gwen raised her fist when she won a medal at Pan Am Games. And the Pan Am folks in the USOC put her on suspension for 12 months. I thought that Avery Brundage had run back from the dead, Brundage was the USOC guy here who chastised Jesse Owens, and he also, in 1968, chastised Tommy Smith Tommy Smith and John Carlos. And so Max Siegel has interceded for Gwen, and the USOC and her are going to have a conversation. I just found that amazingly frightening that the USOC thinks they can still do these kind of things, and claiming that sports and politics don't mix. It's mixed since the beginning of time.
Well, people here were tweeting, is it really 50 years since the Mexico 68 protest, and we've made no progress on the issue at all?
No, especially, it's I find the talk from the IOC about change is one thing. The actions are another. And that same inability to communicate in a way that normal people understand, which apparently is the problem with most bureaucracies, is still an issue with the IOC and the USOC. The way the Tokyo 2020 to 2021 thing's been handled, the only thing they've done well is that Thomas Bach and the LOC have said, look, it's not going to happen in 2021. It's not going to happen. And my son has been updating me on Paris 2024, and my French news sources are all saying that, hey, there's a significant movement about, are we even going to do Paris 2024? And so I mean, that cloud is all hanging over us right now until we figure out what's going to go on with COVID-19. And I guess the numbers in the UK have been a little better, and they've calmed down a bit here. But we're finally starting to do a little more testing, but still not enough in the US.
Yeah. Well, we've hit 40,000 deaths, and the government originally said we should be aiming to keep it under 20.
Well, our kind president over here told us that he had it under control, and then I think it went to, he thought 60 or 70,000, and then he said he wanted to keep it under 120, and now it's 105. But it's I'm hoping the kids who protested, I don't wish anybody to get COVID, and I'm hoping that they don't get it. What's been happening over here, where I'm at in San Jose, we're under a curfew, and it begins at 8:30 at night and goes till 5 in the morning, and that's because there have been groups, and I'm not sure from my news sources that it's all the same kids who are doing the Black Lives Matter protest. I think it's other groups, and they've been looting. And so San Francisco, San Jose, so San Francisco's about 600,000 people. San Jose is about 970,000, so it's the biggest in this area. And about 7 other towns, cities, have all put curfews down, and they're enforcing them. And my brother's a couple blocks from the downtown, and he said, yeah, they're pretty serious about it. So it's another part of the surreal world, my friend, that we're living in right now. But so how was any comments that from some of the British athletes that you thought were that were memorable about Black Lives Matter?
I mean, Tiffany Porter, who is a British athlete but who has lived most of her life in the US, has always had the Black Lives Matter on her as part of her Twitter feed. And yeah, I mean, I've exchanged some personal messages with people, and probably the problem is not as much in the public eye in the UK, but there's still massive issues. And I mean, there was a great quote from the Formula One auto racer world champion Lewis Hamilton, who is a person of color. And he said, in fact, his boss was quoted as saying, Lewis said to me, how often do you think about being white? And the person replied, I never think about being white. And Lewis said to me, well, you ought to start thinking about it every day. Then you'll understand how we feel. Wow.
No, that's a great comment. I mean, some of the athletes over here have made very thoughtful comments. What's sad is the number. I mean, I put up Black Lives Should Always Matter on our sites, and in each case, I got some pretty tacky notes back. And I'm all for people having different opinions. I'm about discussion, and that's how we learn, I believe. And I think that. And to me, it's quite ironic because I was 10 years old, but in 1968, and I remember being at a Cub Scout event when we heard that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I was in St. Louis, and I remember some people aghast, but some people absolutely despised him. And that's when I first began to understand some of the divides in this country. And then I remember Robert F. Kennedy in June of that year being shot. And it was, I understand what the kids are feeling now. They're a sense of what is going on in our world, because that's what we were feeling back then,
Yeah.
And I think that there's been very little change, especially in this country. You know, the police brutality and the militarization of the police has been a big issue over here. And I have cops in my family, my grandpa and my uncle, and spent a lot of time around them. And I know there's good men and women out there who do it, but I also understand that how the pressure can get, and I'm not sure there's systems in place there's certain cities over here that police officers are actually joining in to protest with the protesters.
Yeah, we've seen that.
Which, you know, was really amazing to me, but that's the way it should be.
Yes.
And the whole thing with people looting, I don't understand that, but I am also really believe in my heart that it's not the same people that are doing the protests.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big difference. And over here, as in the UK, well, my readers with my coaching magazines and my print magazines, it was about 40% African American and 12% Latino. And I always liked that because I thought for most white kids, the first chance they got to hang out, and especially in big cities with African American kids and other kids of color, was on the track team. And what's ironic is that Brown University announced this week. So Brown's a very famous school on the East Coast. They have a $4.2 billion endowment. The highest number of ethnic minority kids on a team at Brown is men's track and field. In fact, there are more African American young men on the men's track and field team and cross country team than there are on 6 of the varsity sports together. And the university said, and I quote, to encourage diversity and to encourage competitiveness, they took 11 of their 39 varsity sports and turned them into clubs, including men's track and field. And so a young man from the school tweeted out, he's a white kid from a white neighborhood, went to a white grade school, white high school. The first time he got to hang out with African American kids was on his college track team. And what's going to happen to kids after that? And that's the lesson. I mean, you know, Sam Adams, who was a longtime coach at UCSB, was this towering guy, was a big decathlete fan, told me one time, bellowed at me, he goes, Larry, coaches are educators first. And I always thought the lessons that I was teaching my kids coaching were more important than teaching them how to throw the javelin or the shot, you know, those life lessons. And that's one of the things that our sport does, you know. And Seb Coe did some nice things this week about trying to support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I respect that. And I think what I saw a couple things that British Athletics did. I'd like to see USATF do more, but I'm really happy that Max Siegel went out of his way to help Gwen Berry. I just think that's a good thing. And that wasn't even on our list of things to talk about today, Stuart. Sorry about that. So Olympic update. Any more thoughts on where the Olympics are in the world? Have you got your hotel for Tokyo?
Yes, I have paid my deposit.
Oh my gosh.
Whether I will be going is an interesting question. I mean, my daughter is a physician, and I just talked to her literally before I spoke to you, and she says we could still have to be confident that a vaccine will be found.
Okay.
But I think if there isn't a vaccine, it's a big question whether the games can take place.
I agree too. I told my son last night that I look at the Tokyo Olympics without a vaccine like this huge Petri dish. And there's going to be 11,000 athletes and 12,000 media, and you're going to mix them all together and send them to 209 countries. And you want to talk about a breakout then. It's just insanity. And
I mean, as someone says, the virus will spread faster, higher, and stronger.
Stuart, that's the quote of the day so far. I like that. The next topic, let's stay on the marathon, the Olympics for a minute. Guy Drew, the 1976 Olympic gold medalist, the hurdles, who, by the way, I have this wall of my favorite Olympic photos, and I have a picture, black and white, of Rod Milburn, the silver medalist, Guy Drew, the gold medalist, after the Montreal final, smoking Camel unfilters. It's priceless. It's one of those things that, just reminds you of how far our society has gone. But Guy Drew did a very articulate piece in Inside the Games in .com it's .biz. That site is one of my favorites. They've just done such a great job in putting together information about the Olympic movement. And Mike Robottom, one of our favorite writers, writes for them, and he wears a green tie better than anybody, But the piece that Guy said was that, look, he said, the IOC is not prepared for a pandemic, and Paris surely isn't. And now the mayor has come out and said, hey, we got to readdress this. And then, in France, being left of center is kind of being normal. And, and I love reading all the French, like, trade unionist papers and, the communist paper. I mean, it's just fun. And they, but all of them are like, what the hell are we trying to host an Olympics for? And I'm still trying to get around the idea that they cancel the European champs, and then 2 weeks later, they're going to do a track meet. So, in the same stadium. So I'm just kind of going, how long is this going to affect us? And my CDC guys won't go on the record for me, but when I say, am I going to be wearing a mask in different places till 2023? They said without a vaccine, yes. And, my son reminds me, Dad, unless they figure that out, you're not going to many places, And that's, I mean, I was terrified enough flying to California, and that was one of the easiest bits of travel. I just wore a mask all the time, What do you think about, in that light, when in the 70s, when I started running, I would wave to everybody I saw running, because there was so few of us out there. And now everybody does it. And, there was the World Athletics just released a survey that said 88% increase in endurance activities right now, which is fantastic. More runners, more walkers. And all the shoe companies I call are selling more shoes than they ever had. And retailers that have websites are doing fantastic. So that's the individual thing. And these virtual races, rock and roll just had one with 26,000 people. And the Boston Marathon canceled and said, we're not going to be an actual event. We're going to be a virtual event. And I'm waiting to see Hugh Brazier announce that for London. I'm waiting to see what Berlin's going to actually do. For a while, I thought New York was going to happen, and I don't know anymore. Are the days of big city marathons until we get a vaccine? Are they just past history?
I think they are, but the context of the UK is that the government is running things almost in 3-week periods, and more is allowed. And British Athletics were very slow in cancelling the anniversary games, and they said that was because they waited to the last minute in case there was any chance of government policy changing. And similarly, I think there's no chance at all of the Birmingham Gateshead Diamond League taking place. But again, that's still on the schedule, and it will stay there until the government actually says it can't take place. But they have said to me on the record that it will not take place without spectators. And I just don't think there's any chance of spectators at an event in August.
This is an aside. I haven't heard much from my favorite mayor, the mayor of London. I just love the way he communicates, and I think he's really great about being inclusive, and that he's also taken some chunks of flesh out of Mr. Trump. Really, I respect him more. Has he made many comments about how's he been dealing with, how's London been dealing with COVID-19?
He has been critical of the government and said they've been too slow. For example, the government has this week said that to travel on public transport, which of course is very big in the UK,
Sure,
you must wear a mask.
Yeah.
And Sadiq Khan, the mayor, has said, well, we should have been doing that a month ago.
Okay, good. No, he was really behind. There was a couple of events that he really liked. He was very supportive of the world champs. He did, I hear, throw a bit of a pisser over he wanted both the marathons during the world champs, I think, on the same day, because he thought that would cause just too much disruption. He's got to look out for everybody, so I respect that. I think those are hard questions. I want to go to your interview with Joe Coates, which I thought you did a great job on. She seems like a pretty straightforward person. I really find it refreshing that UK Athletics has picked someone from outside of the sport, but who has had success in sports and other activities. What was your assessment of her?
I was enormously impressed with her, to start with, that she was willing to give half an hour to me, and that she imposed no conditions on the interview. That was just me and her. No media briefing person telling her what to say and what not to say. And I felt she didn't dodge any questions. I think she's incredibly frustrated that she is working from home, having all these ideas, and cannot implement anything. And the biggest things that she's doing is cancelling events. So it's an awful time to start the job. But I really get the impression that she is willing to listen.
Well, sports fans, we had a little glitch from the Zoomsters, and we're back. Stuart's in Oxford, England. Larry's in San Jose, California. We were talking about Joe Coates. And Stuart, tell me a little bit more about what you thought about Joe.
Well, I mean, first of all, I was impressed that she was willing to give half an hour of her time just to talk to me, that she was alone, no minders, no media briefers or anything like that. And I mean, I think it's incredibly frustrating for her to start the job and suddenly she's in lockdown. I mean, she was speaking to me from her home. And but I mean, I think she's got a vision. I think she's willing to listen to people. I mean, we discussed the fact that she doesn't have a track and field background, and she thought that was an advantage, not a disadvantage, because you're perhaps more dispassionate and you can see things that someone who is on the inside doesn't see. But then, of course, she said it's so important for me to have people around me who do understand the sport, who can guide me. And she told me that she thought her strength was strategic leadership, that seeing where an organization needs to go and helping it to get there. And again, she was very committed to restoring public confidence because for whatever reason, British athletics has had real problems of governance, since the period when Ed Warner was the chairman and Neil DeVos was the chief executive together for a number of years. We're 3 years on from that, and we've had two permanent chairmen, but they left both fairly quickly, and we don't have a chairman at the moment. And this is the first permanent CEO who's been appointed. It's taken 3 years to appoint a permanent CEO to replace Neil DeVos. But, she is someone with a wide range of experience in other sports. And I think she's got a lot going for her, and I think she'll do a good job.
Cool. What do you see as the... you seem relatively happy with the way that UK Athletics develops its relays. And obviously you guys have strength in the multi-events and in the The middle distances, you've got some really nice up-and-coming people, and you've got some strong sprinters. What do you see the weakest part or the biggest challenge for Joe Coates?
Well, I mean, micro level, I think we are always weaker in the throwing events.
Okay.
But I think the biggest challenge for Joe Coates and the biggest challenge for every sport other than soccer in the UK at the moment is that our government has done brilliant things to support the economy during this pandemic, but it has racked up massive debts, which we will be repaying for a number of years. And whether the British government will have the money to put into sport that they have done in the past is a big question. You know, at the moment, there's over 100 athletes, elite athletes, employed by British athletics on funding. You know, we're talking of sums around $30,000 plus the medical, plus training camps and all that. And what if the government comes back and says, well, actually, we don't have that money anymore. We won't have it for at least 5 years while we try to rebuild the economy.
Yeah.
Suddenly, a lot of the infrastructure in all the Olympic sports in Britain could be under threat.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if big business is struggling to establish itself, corporate sponsorship may be a lot more difficult than it has been in the past. So I think that is the challenge. And again, you know, you just add it on. The anniversary games was a massive money spinner for British athletics. Not happening this year.
Yeah. Did they make money with it last year?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you get some television income, and you've got the anniversary games, 2-day event, probably 25 to 30,000 each time.
Yeah. Do you so was moved to Gateshead, is that correct?
The Birmingham has moved to Gateshead, yes.
And that's because Birmingham is rebuilding is it the Alexander?
Yes,
what's
the Alexander Stadium, yes.
Alexander Stadium. And that's due to the Commonwealth Games, correct?
Yes.
Now, is there fears about the Commonwealth Games in 2022, or are they pretty set?
No, I think that they're well. I think they're fine, but you know, the worst possible scenario, if there isn't a vaccine, and if the pandemic is still around, I mean that's the only thing I could think of. Interestingly, when the World Championships in Oregon and were postponed. One scenario would have been for Birmingham to postpone itself by a year, but they chose not to. The Birmingham City Council basically said, no, we're having it in 2022, which creates an interesting situation where you have Oregon, the Commonwealth Games, and the European Championships all within about a 6-week period.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's fine for sprinters, but, you know, can distance runners take on 3 championships in that period?
Yeah.
And will people want to? And if not, which one will they drop?
Sure.
I think that could be an issue for the Commonwealth. And I think we talked about this before, but because the Commonwealth is not Britain, but is England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. I mean, Laura Muir, for example, who is Scottish, might decide, looking at it rationally, that the European Championship and the World Championships are the 2 I should do. But because she's Scottish, she would be under massive pressure to represent Scotland in the Commonwealth Games. So I think that is a tricky one for athletes.
Okay. I want to talk about the farmer president of the IAAF, Lamine Diack. His trial is set to begin on Monday. He has been under house arrest, I believe, for about 3.5 years in Paris with a little ankle bracelet. How do you think this is going to play out?
You still haven't sent me the crystal ball, and you keep asking me these questions. I mean, one feels that the authorities must think that they've got a pretty strong case against him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have invested all they have in it.
Mm-hmm.
But, we all know that court cases can go either way.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. And then also, Diack is 86 years old.
Mm.
And, I don't believe he's going to serve any jail time.
Mm.
I think the best thing for the French is they want to get it done with. I understand they're furious that the president of Senegal continues to refuse extradition for Papa Diack. And I just thought Papa Diack would end up, going away somewhere and no one hear from him again, or But apparently, when you support the president, allegedly support the president of Senegal in his election, and the money came from, of all places, Mr. Putin, it just adds for even. It's like a Robert Ludlum novel, And I'm waiting to see who's going to play which part, But
I think the question I have in the back of my mind is that if Diack does go down, will he suddenly at the trial attempt to take a few with him?
Yes. Well, it's his son, took down Nick Davies pretty hard. And, Nick was a dear friend of mine and very well respected within the industry. And many people are still confounded by that. And I think Diack wanted to show what he could do, and he did it. I also think it's been an odor or a stench that our friend Lord Coe has had to deal with his entire time.
Lord Coe was famously asked on a British television interview, were you corrupt or were you asleep?
Wow. Yeah, I know, I think, my gut tells me and my observational skills tell me that I think at a certain point he was just waiting for Diack to get out of there so he could help make it better. And I think the level of depravity has surprised even him.
Yeah.
The challenge is, and Seb just put something out this week about a new action plan, and I've been waiting for my keen observers to give me comments on it. The first couple asked me, this doesn't sound like anything new, and I'm welcoming the innovation that they're trying to do, like with the garden clashes. There's another one this weekend.
Yes.
And I think that the Joseph Odlozil Memorial meets on Monday, June 8th in the Czech Republic, which is always a pretty high-class meet. It's, I believe, with the exception of perhaps an Austrian athlete, it's mostly Czech athletes.
Yes.
And then on the 11th, we've got Oslo, and they're doing some fun things. I mean, I'm tickled that they're doing an event in honor of Maury Plant. Maury was one of the true characters of the sport.
Yes.
And a man of much complication. There were things he did that he probably regretted, but for the most part, this man loved the sport.
Yes.
And he spent his life trying to do good things, and he absolutely adored the Oslo meeting. And my last conversations with him were about the whole theme of supporting Norwegian athletes, which they had done the last couple of years. And if Maury were kicking around today, he would. I think he'd be very happy with some of the things they're doing. I mean, Norway's got some tremendous talent, and they will highlight them there, and that'll be fun because people are going crazy right now. You know?
Yes, I personally am going to miss the annual snowball throwing contest that always takes place as part of the Bislett Games.
Yes, you know, I think that snowball stuff is fun. I told that to a few people, and they were like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Oh, yes." You know,
I wouldn't introduce that in California, though.
Yeah, I think that maybe not be the actually. You know how I learned about it was Karen Smith, the American javelin thrower.
Mm.
God, this has got to be in the mid '90s. She would go and do a snowball throwing thing in Norway, and she'd also do one in Germany, pick up a few bucks for it, and told me how similar it was to throwing the javelin. And I just thought it sounded so cool, you know.
But hey, on Thursday night, you and I will need to have a strawberry just to remember the strawberry party.
I will make sure that was pretty amazing. Now, I'm going back. There's senior moments once in a while, Stuart, but I seem to recall the first year that Karston Warholm ran the hurdles in Oslo. Edwin Moses tried to give him some advice, and I seem to recall you being there.
Yes, I remember that.
And you were rather you weren't real sure Karston was taking it seriously. And you know, and Edwin is Edwin. You know, he is a tremendous athlete and spokesperson for the sport at Laureus. And I remember when he ran the hurdles, I actually even got to see him run indoors a couple times, which he wasn't real happy with because he's such a tall guy. But, you know, Karston is just a phenomenal athlete.
Indeed.
And but he's also a bit of a character, too. And,
indeed.
You know, and that's what makes it fun. You know, you get guys like him and the Ingebrigtsens, and, you know, it just adds color to the sport and keeps it fun.
But I would say for all of those, the Ingebrigtsens and Karston, is that they make themselves very accessible to the media. You know, they're willing to chat. Just going back to Edwin Moses, I don't know whether you remember an old friend of mine called Chris Akabusi.
You got a problem, Akabusi, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Chris Akabusi, in my hearing, was once asked, "Have you ever run with Edwin Moses?" And Akabusi replied, "No, I haven't, but I've run behind him."
That's a great comment. Yeah. No, it's just, well, I knew, let's see, who was the gentleman who broke his streak? It was right after right before the '88 Olympics, and a guy from San Jose went to Independence High School, but he was it was 111, I think, plus events, and that was just phenomenal, and that was fun to watch. And of course, US TV played that up like crazy, you know, because that was such a big deal. Our final topic for today I had was, do you have a favorite field event?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I would say the triple jump.
Oh my gosh. Why do you like the triple jump?
Well, I'm old enough to remember 1995 when Jonathan Edwards broke the world record twice in half an hour. I think one of the athletes who conducts himself so brilliantly, so professionally, with so much dignity at all times is Christian Taylor.
Yes, agreed.
And again, there are a few characters.
Sure.
And whatever it is about the University of Florida, they seem to have a production line of triple jumpers.
Yes.
And, you know, Will Clay and Omar and so on. I just think it's an odd event, but it's really quite fascinating. And I actually, funnily enough, once was on a British television program when I was interviewed by Jonathan Edwards. I mean, how about that? That was a real
wow, that's cool.
He was presenting the program, and we did the interview in the old Olympic Stadium, 1896.
Oh, neat.
And where the triple jump was in the program, but it was, I think, 2 steps in a jump.
Oh my gosh.
And we discussed this and whether it would make a difference. And Jonathan didn't think it would make much of a difference, really, that if you were doing it that way. But I mean, I think it's a great shame that it's been taken out of the Diamond Leagues. And I mean, again, women's triple jump has been slow to develop, but has now reached a fascinating stage where you've got some really 3 or 4 excellent jumpers. And I mean, funny enough, I recently did an interview with Katura Orji, who was just expressing concern that it won't be possible for triple jumpers to earn a living, you know, if it's not in the major meets.
Yeah.
So I just think it's got great excitement because, in a way, you know, you can, the long jump you can understand. You know, you come to a river and you have to jump over it. High jump, you have to jump over a fence and so on. But the triple jump, it just seems to be this unique event, and how you have just the three elements to it. And you know, I just think we've seen some incredibly exciting triple jump competitions, and you know, Jonathan Edwards being, I think, the first person to go over 18 meters and is it over 90 feet, whatever it is, that, you know, he did a milestone in both. And the fact that his world record has stayed for so long, that Christian gets close to it, but not quite.
Yeah.
Jonathan is very honest when you say, you know, I've heard him say, you know, people say, oh, I really would like my record to be broken. Well, I don't. I hope my record is never broken.
Yeah. No, it's Seb Coe was quoted by the American writer Kenny Moore saying that the triple jump is the most difficult event on one's body. And that was in a piece on Jonathan Edwards. And Gothenburg was my first World Championships. And I was sitting up in the stands right next to the track and field statistician, Don Potts. And he told me to watch the triple jump. And he said, watch every jump. And I did. And I was astounded at the speed that Jonathan had. And, you know, in the U.S. for a long time, obviously, we called it the hop, skip, and jump. And that's what you learned in grade school.
Yes.
And just those simple jumping, you get an appreciation for what Jonathan did. And he was in a zone that I've seen very few people ever in. When he did that day, it reminded me of Haile Gebrselassie in '96 and in 2000, and especially in 2000, where he won the 10,000 meters from Turgot by less than 0.08 of a second. And you watched Gebrselassie just go to that place, and that's what Jonathan had done, you know. And I look at Wade Vanderkerk when he broke Michael Johnson's record, you know, and I was there in '96 to watch the 200 that Johnson did and watched him stumble. I had my binoculars on him, and I watched him stumble in that third step. And I think that's the reason why he broke the record. It just brought him into the zone. In Sevilla, when he broke the 400, he could have broken it in the semifinals. And at he was on world record pace. He had a world record pace at 300 meters, and he jogged a 43.7 or something. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I went up to his coach afterwards and I said, yeah, so he's going for it in the final. And he looked at me and he goes, yes, he is. You know, and to see those things in a world record is such a world record is supposed to be something that you savor, because it's not supposed to happen all the time.
Yeah.
But the triple jump, I remember what was the summer of summer of 17. Well, yeah, the summer of 16 and 17, but probably the best was the summer of 15 when I followed Christian Taylor and the Cuban, was it Pichardo,
yes.
around. They were duking it out. And I remember being in Lausanne, and those things were just phenomenal. And Christian would get so worked up, and watching them, and it was like a bullfight because you saw Taylor do this 18-plus meter jump, and Pichardo came up and bumped him as he went to get his place, and that was it. That's when Taylor got, his angry, Christian going. And could you never see, because he's such this wonderful person. But I try to explain to people, when you're competing, there's nothing else around. You can be the best buddy with someone outside of the ring, outside off the track. That's what my generation was taught. But on the track, it was about competing, and that's what we look for. That's what we search for, and those are the challenges. And so I think that those are the things that keep us excited. I love all field events. I have to say the triple jump is a fabulous one. I need to relate a story about the hammer throw. I got into the hammer throw probably in the 90s, and I was down at the Mount Sac meet, and it's got to be 1993. And Ken Flax, an American hammer thrower. So there must have been 3,000 people watching the hammer at Mount Sac. There's a lot of throw geeks down there. And there was a couple that had their little ice chest about 265 feet from the ring. And they had a watermelon in it, and they had wine out and food and everything. And they were going to have a nice little snack while they were watching the throws. And Ken puts a sector fall out about 266 feet. And the hammer almost went straight up. And you saw this hammer coming back down. And the people scattered. A couple people there at this place. And the hammer went right into their ice chest. And what came up was just this big thing of pink juice. And that night, I was with Ken and some of the throwers somewhere, and one of my buddies said, Larry, we could make the hammer really fun. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, from 200 to 230 feet, we'll put muskmelons. And from 240 to 250, we'll put cantaloupes. And then we'll put watermelons. So when the hammer hits, juice flies everywhere, and the throwers looked at him like he was a little weird, and they said, people would kind of dig it, So, but I love the technicalness of the hammer. And when I was coaching American high school, the coach, I worked with Terry Ward at Bellarmine, and Terry set up a Boy Scout troop, got somebody to donate some land, and we put a hammer cage underneath a highway overpass. And I bought the kids who did well, I bought them their first adult hammers. And it was Kevin McMahon, and I think his name was Kevin Popejoy. They both went to the same high school. One went to Georgetown for college, was coached by Hal Connolly. One went to Oregon and was coached by Stuart Toger, but both made world championship teams in the hammer. So it was kind of fun watching kids from my high school throw. And I just learned to really appreciate it, And then, of course, being around Chris Turner with the IAAF, that man hasn't seen a javelin throw he didn't like. And, I would go hang out with him sometimes in some of the javelin competitions. And the guy, it was like having my own, TV announcer. And, when you have more information about it, that's the kind of fun stuff that that IAAF announcer, Rob, I forget his last name, who's been doing the Garden Clashes. He does Rob Walker. My gosh, he's fantastic. He was at if anybody can listen to the night that Mutaz won the high jump was probably the finest night of announcing I've ever heard. And Rob did a great job. Well, he had the steeplechase that night. He had, Mutaz. And I had gotten sick, a little bit of food poisoning that day. And so I couldn't get TV in my hotel room. So I had to listen to the radio that night. And it was fabulous. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
And it was just high pictures, you know.
I need to tell you that Rob's parents live 2 miles down the road from me.
Oh, great. Well, you should tell them that, tell them he's socially isolated, that Americans like him. No, he's fantastic. And what he's done with the garden clashes has been wonderful.
Yeah. But you see, I think this is where the IWF have got it wrong, the World Athletics, sorry.
Yeah.
That rather than saying, oh, these field events are boring, so we're going to stop them, is get a stadium announcer to describe to people what's happening so that people engage with it.
Yes. I mean, the pole vault, come on now. The characters we have on the pole vault and on the guy's side, Mondo Duplantis, you know, has got the biggest ego I've ever loved to see. This young man thinks he can do anything.
Yeah.
And, you know, Renault, well, hell, he's French on top of that, you know. And the first time I did an interview with La Villeneuve, he messed me up and acted like he could not speak English. And so my questions were painfully, you know, grade school French. And he answered them. And then after that, he kind of patted me on the shoulder and said, you know, hey, you did pretty good. And it was just a screw with me. And I really appreciated that. But Renault these guys, they really love what they do. And the women's vault, you know, Katerina is always so accommodating to us.
Yes.
The media thing. And that's one of the things I have to think really hard about athletes who will not do interviews for us or just won't, you know. I was in Doha. A couple of the brands were setting up interviews. And most of them were, 15, 20 minutes. And I remember sitting down with Noah Lyles. And I've interviewed Noah, oh my gosh, 15 times now. And I just really enjoy him because it's very relaxed. And he really likes doing interviews, you know. And it was over 100 degrees and the air conditioning had crashed and we're still talking. And he's enjoying it. And and Christian Taylor's a lot like that too.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing I enjoy when you do the weekly interviews that we post up on RunBlogRun. I can see you asking the athletes the questions.
Yeah.
Because there's a dynamic in doing a good interview. Yeah. And I was telling my son the other day that the tactic that I use, I learned from an Australian writer named Brian Linton. And Brian hates flying airplanes. And his tactic is to take a six-pack into a room and offer the interviewer a beverage. And then he never prepares any questions. They just go back and forth. Yeah. Now, I don't offer a beverage, and I will have a list of questions, but I kind of go with how it goes in the interview, you know?
Yeah.
Because you don't know where the athletes are going to take you. And I want to learn things about them as much as they want us to know about them, you know? Yeah. And I think that keeps it fun. So we're getting down to our last couple of minutes today, Stuart. Thank you for having time on a Friday night, and we'll be posting this on a Monday. But Mike Deering, our dear producer, has got some travel in front of him, and you know he does get allowed. He is allowed to have a life, and
well, I don't know. I have to reprimand him because you see, our government would ask him whether it was necessary travel.
Yes, that's a good point. It's a very good point. I'll have to ask him that later today. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, it's strange over here. There are all 50 states are in a kind of trying to get back. We're in California now, and I have lived out here off and on since 1974. And I can tell you right now that you can go from San Jose to Santa Cruz in 30 minutes without speeding. And on a typical Friday, when it would take you 2 hours any other time pre-COVID. People are really following it. And I think what's nice is that people are getting more times with their families.
Yeah.
And you know, they're exercising, they're talking, and hopefully people are a little more gentle with each other. I think there's things we can learn from this. And, you know, my mom always tried to get me to accentuate the positives, because what's the other choice? Being a grump. But, you know, we're getting, people are actually watching our videos, Stuart, so I just want you to know that. And
really?
they're not, they watch it and they comment. They seem to think that, well, last week they told me my beard needed a trim, so I did get that. And someone said I looked like a combination of Ted Kaczynski and one of our presidents, Millard Fillmore. I think the Millard on the sideburns, but I've got that all taken care of now. And I did this socially distanced, just so you know, trying to keep it that way. But Stuart, thank you very much for this week. We will chat again in about 9 days. And I hope you have a lovely weekend in Oxford, England.
Good. Okay, and thank you very much.
This is Larry and Stuart signing off. And exercise socially responsibly. Love your families. Hug the people you can hug socially without getting sick. And just stay careful. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Hey, sports fans, Larry Eater with RunBlogRun. This is the Athletics Chat numero 4, Katra. And this is the Epilogue. And let me put my glasses on so I can be even more thoughtful. All right? So greetings from San Jose, California. We're recording this on Friday, and we'll have it up on Monday. But this thing, Stuart Weir, our senior editor for European athletics, is based in Oxford, England. I'm in San Jose now. I was in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, but I went from the socially distanced Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, a town of 10,000, to a city of 974,000, which is amazingly socially distanced, except for the folks you're seeing down and protesting in downtown San Jose. And while I support civil disobedience and peaceful civil disobedience, I do not support looting under any circumstances. And I do think it's different groups, and I think you've got to look at the whole picture too. The Black Lives Matter movement, again, unfortunately, had to deal with coming to the forefront again because of senseless racism and also police brutality. And it's unfortunately, part of the American ecosystem and culture right now. And I'm not sure much has changed since Martin Luther King was assassinated in April of 1968. Then Robert Kennedy in June of 1968. I remember both of them because I was 11 years old. And it was terrible, and still puts a pain in to think about those things. And for someone who also can remember John F. Kennedy being assassinated, it just makes it sadder and sadder. Some of the positives now are that in Wisconsin, most people were pretty darn thoughtful about COVID-19 and the pandemic. And in California, you see the same thing. Sure, you see knuckleheads, but even we drove down to Santa Cruz to enjoy some cool air because it was 106 here in San Jose. Even in Santa Cruz, there was a protest at Lighthouse Point, and most of the people had masks on and socially distanced. And you know what? That's good. Unfortunately, a lot are not. And my friends in the medical community, who have been correct in everything they've told me so far, I found out about the pandemic in January. And from the information I had January 28th, I had to make a decision about going to Europe in February, and I had to cancel because I knew that with my medical conditions, it could not be, it could be a difficult thing. And that, so we went to Wisconsin and San Jose, and then got stuck in Wisconsin for about 3 months, which was wonderful, being with our friends and being in the small community. And now we're in San Jose, and I'm in my parents' backyard. My father died April 26, 2020. He was 81 years old, and The reason why I do what I do is because of the encouragement of my father, Stan, and my mom, Mary Lou. They believe their 5 kids could do anything, and they encourage us to try everything. And I'm sitting in the backyard now, and you can hear the little chimes. That these are stuff my mom collected over 30 years, and I've got 3 or 4 hummingbirds, literally, who will come and sit next to my shoulder and just kind of check me out. And I think one of them is my mother reincarnated, but that's me. I have that whole. Some people get messed up on drugs. I get messed up on religion. So anyway, Stuart and I had a great talk today. We did talk about Black Lives Matter and how UK Athletics put a picture up of their all-black relay team just to remind people what's going on in the world. And I wanted to give a sign of respect to Max Siegel, who interceded with USOC and Gwen Berry. Gwen Berry had raised her fist at the Pan Am medal ceremony and got chastised by the USOC, which totally embarrassed me. I thought that Avery Brundage, the former head of the USOC and a man who had leanings, if he wasn't a fascist, he sure supported it. And he sure wasn't very kind to African Americans, having jerked around Jesse Owens, among others, and John Carlos and Tommy Smith, 32 years later, or 1968 as opposed to 1936. 32 years later. So is Avery Brundage in the room, or what the hell's going on? But the USOC should be embarrassed. That's absolute bullshit. Protest is all about, that's part of the American character. Peaceful protest is important. It's part of our dialogue. It's part of how we learn things as a culture. Sometimes we have to be thrown kicking and screaming into things. And I didn't even know about the Gwen Berry thing, and I'm embarrassed. And it just annoys the hell out of me that in this day and age, the USOC can behave like this. Not acceptable, nor is the Pan Am Committee any less culpable. It's total bullshit. Marathons can happen. Yeah, nothing's going to happen, kids, until we get a vaccine, okay? I got to hand it to Thomas Bach. He surprised the hell out of me, and so did John. John Coates, he's a pretty straight shooter, the LSE guy in Tokyo. And that's what they should be. It gives them credibility. And Bach's in a tough place. The Olympic movement is being challenged. Their way of making money is through media revenue, through TV revenue, and NBC's spending billions and billions of dollars, not trillions of stars, to do coverage of the Olympics. I still think that there's things they do that are admirable, but there's a lot they're totally missing. And buy me a couple cocktails and we could help stuff out. But sorry about that. The issue is, God, how did that happen? Oh, I know why. Because my phone was on, so I'm going to try to turn that off. There we go. All right, so I'm back. So the issue is that until we have a vaccine, it's going to be very difficult to do an Olympics. So I'm not sure we're going to even have a 2021 Olympics. I'm not sure we're going to have 2022. Are people going to want to go to Beijing? And yes, there were some problems in China. It's much more complicated than you think. My contacts there say it was the local government in Wuhan, and the Communist Party jumped on them. All you have to do is see who's been replaced and who's kind of disappeared. And they've just done 11 million tests there, so they're trying to clean up their act. Was this some military thing? No, it wasn't. It was more than likely something of Mother Nature gone awry, which is going to continue to happen. And because we believe that there's, some people believe that Martians brought this to us. Others believe it was the communists. I think it was natural, wonderful human stupidity and arrogance that why we're dealing with COVID-19 right now. And just a bit on the Republican Party. I wish Barry Goldwater was alive because he would strike most of the Republicans dead right now and turn them into a pillar of salt. And while I didn't agree with Goldwater all the time, I found him fascinating. This guy would have encouraged the legalization of marijuana. He would look at you and just said, if you're questioning science, you're sure not a Republican. We've bastardized that party. I don't mind people having different political beliefs. But right now it seems that the Republican Party doesn't want any beliefs. And that's why people tend to call it a little too right-wing. But the Democrat Party screwed it up too. So let's get 6 parties out there. I want the Whigs, I want the Tories, I want the Who Gives a Shit Party, and I'm going to start the get the Peace and Freedom Party going again. But let's change the U.S. political system. I want a democracy, you know. Go back and read A Proud Tower by Barbara Tuchman and The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman. She was a female historian. I know you guys can't believe that could actually happen. Go out there and read some of the stuff by Mary Gordon, my dear professor at Santa Clara University. And you can learn a lot. But anyway, I doubt if big marathons are going to happen because without a vaccine, how do you put a big group together? So I don't think we're going to see squat till 2023. We may see some hybrids because we're going to want to have something going, you know. Joe Coates, Stuart interviewed Joe Coates, the new CEO of UK Athletics, and I'm fascinated to see how she does. She reminds me of my boss at Runner's World back in 1985 when it was sold, a guy named Mike Perlis. Mike did not have a running background, but Mike was a fine publisher, and he came in and he put Runner's World into a place that it could prosper. And under George Hirsch for the next 3 decades, it did. And now we're kind of wondering where it's at. It's at the home of, I believe, Mr. William Randolph Hearst III, who I think I met when I was working at AOL back in the 90s or 80s. Such a lost decade. Anyway, but Joe should do well. Next, Lamine Diack. If I had my choice, Lamine and Papa would be shoveling shit in some really hot place somewhere. They have bastardized our sport. They've hit over $50 million. And they've got it easy. Full bracelet, living in Paris is still living in Paris, even if you're stuck in your house. And I don't feel bad for a guy who can afford €750,000 bail. Papa Diack, you know, perhaps he could, I know it's all alleged, but, you know, he should be the focus of a Robert Ludlum novel. Maybe he could choke on some chicken soup or something, but he's not a good person. And he hurt the sport. They both hurt the sport. And Seb Coe, whatever you have to say about Seb, has dealt with that stench and odor for the last 4 years. I would like to see a couple years where he doesn't have to deal with it. But he's dealing right now with COVID-19, and I'm not sure which is more difficult. Favorite field event? Stuart said the triple jump. We all love Jonathan Edwards. We really enjoy Christian Taylor and Pedro Pichardo and Will Clay. Those guys are fun. We enjoy the women of the triple jump. Just amazing athletes and amazing characters. And that's one of the beauties of athletics. I can't think of an athlete right now who isn't a fun interview. I've interviewed Carl Lewis. I've interviewed people they said were nightmares. And, you know, you find a common ground. You ask them questions. You learn about them. I still think the method that I use is the Brian Lenton method. Brian is a friend from Australia who is fearful of airplanes, but wrote 3 or 4 books. And his whole idea of an interview is to take a 6-pack of an adult beverage, sit down with your interviewer. He did one with Brendan Foster and another one with the late Ron Clark. Both are hysterical. And also with Roger Bannister that I absolutely love. He just didn't prepare the questions. And, you know, it's kind of a Zen way of doing things, and it's fun. Stuart is much more prepared, and you can see that. I prepare questions, but most of the time I don't use them because we start having a conversation and kind of see where things go. And I want to learn about the athletes I'm interviewing because that's what I'm trying to share with you guys, men and women. So But triple jumping love, hammer throw. I told the story about the hammer throw, Ken Flax, a foul about 268 feet, Joe Mangan, and I watched it at Mount Sac about 1993, and the hammer landed in an ice chest with a lovely pink watermelon, and the juice just went straight up into this one big drip and dropped. It was a Zen moment. It was a moment of Larry. No drugs were needed, and it was a lot of fun. And I think that you should have cantaloupes out between 220 and 240 feet, watermelons after that, and maybe fireworks after that. Let's keep it fun. Pole vault. Athletes in the pole vault are great. Mondo Duplantis. Mondo Duplantis has got the talent, but also the ego to be a great athlete. Renaud Villeneuve. Renaud is the king. He's just a class act. Good man. Totally messed with me the first interview I ever did with him. Act like he spoke no English, and my French was shit. As a couple of my friends said, like, tell me, Larry, stick to English. That's hard enough for you. And then Sam Kendricks. Love Sam. Just a good guy. And two of the finest interviews, I will put up his medal ceremony from Doha. Two of the finest pressers I have ever seen. That one, and then the men's decathlon. The Katerina Stefanidi, Kati Nagiot, and I'm forgetting the Canadian vaulter right now that I enjoy so much. She did a lovely job at that event. Alicia Newman, and of course Sandy Morris. And I really enjoy the Russian vaulters. They've been very thoughtful, and I enjoy their athleticism. But there's not an event in athletics I don't love, man. I started out as a distance runner, and I learned how to coach all the field events, not well, but learned how to coach them, and from observation and being around the late Hank Kettles. Hank, really taught me a lot in the 6 years we were at Foothill together. He passed away just a couple years ago, and he was a dear man. And of course, Joe Mangan, my Zen mentor, and Terry Ward at Bellarmine, Dan Durante, my coach at Santa Clara, and Jim Heineke from DeSmet. And Rich Grauer. Rich Grauer, I think, is 100 years old. No, he's about late 80s, and guy still scares the hell out of me. And it's not because he's mean or anything. He just demanded respect. He was a history teacher and really taught me how to research history. In fact, for the research project I did in 1972, I had to look up the Royal Dutchman sailing class, and I believe Mr. Bach, the president of the IOC, was one of the medalists in that event in 1972, I think. Anyway, but I studied as a historian, and I got into journalism. And thank you for watching our tapes, listen to me go on. Thank Mike Deering, who's sitting in the background, getting ready to go on a little trip this week, and who managed all this for us so well today. We had a couple little technical difficulties. Our friends at Zoom, had a couple issues. But Mikey, thank you very much. Love you. Enjoy your vacation time. To all our listeners and readers, hey, pass this around and get more people to watch this stuff. And do me a favor. The Brooks and the Nike brands are really supporting us right now. And Brooks is really going out of their way. Support the brands to support your favorite running media. It means a lot. And it gives us a little bit of cash so I can actually pay people, which is a nice concept. Larry Eder with RunBlogRun, signing off. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Isolate. The second round of COVID is coming soon. Please be careful, okay? Love your families. Spend time with them. Zoom conference them. Hug the ones that you're close to. Get your walks in, your runs in, do your workouts, but stay safe and isolate wherever you're at in the country, okay? If you don't have to be around a big group, and wear a mask. I got a 49er mask. Yes, I'll get a Packer mask when I go back to Wisconsin, but I had to be culturally relevant, okay? Talk to you guys soon. Have a great day.